I first saw my name crossed out on a guest list outside the Hawthorne Meridian's private event floor, where I was supposed to belong. Not canceled, not delayed, not misspelled. Just marked absent in neat black ink beside the name Brooke Ellison. Like someone had erased me politely. I stood there with my coat still damp from Portland rain, staring at that single word while the hallway hummed with glasses, laughter, and low-moneyed voices. Then Marissa Pike touched my elbow and whispered, "Brooke, I need you to stay calm, because your husband checked in 20 minutes ago." I looked through the open doorway before my mind had time to protect me, and there was Travis Reed beside Kendra Wells. He was smiling with that practiced warmth he used around donors, one hand resting lightly behind her back as if he had earned the room. Kendra wore a silver guest badge on a thin black ribbon, and my stomach tightened before I even read the small printed code beneath her name. That badge belonged to the temporary access group issued through my office, the one I had approved for museum guests, not for my husband's private performance. Marissa kept her voice low, but every word landed clean. He asked the desk to mark you unavailable, then added her under your group. I did not move toward them, because the truth was already moving faster than I could. Kendra touched the badge once, almost casually, like a woman checking jewelry, but her fingers paused long enough to tell me she knew what it meant. Travis leaned toward two donors and laughed at something one of them said, wearing my professional trust like a jacket he had borrowed without asking. I stepped back before either of them saw me, my pulse hard but strangely organized, as if shock had sharpened instead of broken me. Outside, the rain smelled metallic against the hotel awning, and I opened my laptop in the front seat with my hands finally steady. I pulled up the museum calendar, the event access sheet, and the guest confirmation thread tied to that silver badge. By the time my screen loaded, I already knew this was not just another woman, because someone had used my name to open the door. By the time I reached the museum, the public galleries were dark, and the night security guard recognized me without asking why I came back. I told him I had to verify an access issue before morning, and he nodded, like those words belonged to a normal work emergency. Inside my office, the quiet felt different. Not peaceful anymore, but disturbed, as if someone had walked through and closed everything wrong. I opened the event access dashboard first, because feelings could be argued with, but timestamps had no interest in protecting anyone. The silver guest badge had been activated under my department code earlier that afternoon, then scanned at the Hawthorne Meridian before I ever arrived. I sat very still, reading the entry twice, because the system showed the badge was requested through a shared event account tied to my office. My folder for the winter community proposal was still on the server, but the last download had happened during a lunch hour when Travis had visited. I remembered him standing in my doorway that day, smiling with coffee in his hand, asking if I was almost ready to leave. I called Dana Whitlock from the empty staff lounge, keeping my voice flat because panic would only make the facts sound smaller. Someone may be using museum access and donor materials through my name, I told her, and she went quiet for one clean second. Then her answer came sharp enough to steady me. Do not touch his phone. Do not threaten anyone. And save only what you can legally access. I wrote that down on the back of an old exhibition receipt, because suddenly my marriage had become something that needed clean documentation. The email thread was worse than the badge. Kendra Wells had written to a donor using the phrase coordinating through Brooke's office, soft enough to sound harmless and precise enough to borrow my credibility. Attached beneath it was language from my proposal about art workshops for women rebuilding after divorce. Words I had written after listening to real people cry in real rooms. She had not stolen a file because it looked useful. She had taken the one paragraph that sounded like a woman had earned the right to be trusted, and she had worn that too. Travis came home just after midnight, carrying the careful silence of a man who had already rehearsed 3 versions of innocence. His coat was still wet at the shoulders, and he paused when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table with one lamp on. Brooke, whatever you think you saw tonight, it was a misunderstanding, he started, but his eyes went straight to the folder beside my hand. I let him stand there long enough to understand that I had not been waiting for comfort, because comfort had stopped being useful hours ago. You marked me absent, I said, sliding the guest list across the table, and his mouth tightened before he remembered to look confused. Travis rubbed his jaw and tried a smaller voice, the one he used with donors when a check was taking too long. The hotel must have handled that wrong, and Kendra was only there because we were discussing a potential event partnership. I placed Kendra's email beside the guest list. The phrase coordinating through Brooke's office highlighted cleanly in yellow, and watched his explanation begin losing air. Then he did what guilty men do when facts stop obeying them. He reached for my character instead of his choices. You've been so wrapped up in the museum that I barely know where I fit anymore. He breathed, like loneliness had printed the badge itself. I looked at the email, the access log, the downloaded proposal, and finally at the man who thought my exhaustion made good camouflage. Don't call it loneliness when you were using my name to make yourself look invited, I answered, and his face changed before he could stop it. I asked whether Kendra knew I was his wife, and the silence that followed was cleaner than any confession he could have given. Travis looked toward the window, then back at me, searching for the version of Brooke who would ask about love before asking about access. That woman was gone. Or maybe she had finally learned which question mattered first. I stood, gathered the papers, and told him he would sleep downstairs while every conversation about the museum stayed in writing. I chose a coffee shop on Southwest Broadway because it was bright, crowded, and too public for anyone to rewrite the meeting later. Kendra Wells arrived 12 minutes late in a cream coat and black dress, polished in the way ambitious people call effortless. She saw me near the window, slowed for half a second, then crossed the room with a smile that measured risk. Brooke, I hope we can keep this reasonable, she murmured as she sat, and I placed the photo of her badge between us. Her eyes dropped to the picture before she could stop them, and that pause told me more than her greeting ever could. I added the printed email beside it, with coordinating through Brooke's office highlighted beneath the clean light. Kendra folded her hands, then reached for the sentence people use when they want innocence without proof. Travis told me your marriage was basically over, she said, as if my vows had expired enough to use my office. I did not argue about love, because love was no longer the evidence. Did he also tell you that badge was issued through my department? I kept my voice low enough that she had to lean closer. Kendra opened her mouth, closed it, then chose the smaller truth because it sounded safer than the full one. He said you never use that access anymore. She breathed, and the words sat between us like a signature. She knew my name, knew the badge was connected to me, and still wore it into a donor room like jewelry. I slid the proposal excerpt forward. The paragraph about art workshops for women rebuilding after divorce copied almost line for line into her note. Networking does not need my name, my access, or my work dressed up as yours, I answered, watching her calm tighten. Kendra looked toward the door, then back at me, suddenly less elegant than when she walked in. What do you want from me? She asked, and I gathered every page back to my side of the table. Remember how it felt when a door opened under my name, I said, standing before my coffee cooled, because that door will not open for you twice. The next preview at the museum was not glamorous enough to disguise what it really was, which made it more dangerous for Travis and Kendra. Local donors, arts reporters, board members, and vendors moved beneath soft gallery lights with the careful smiles people use around money and reputation. I arrived as Brooke Ellison, Public Programs Director, not as a wife looking for a scene or a woman begging for witnesses. Travis saw me near the entrance, then looked away too quickly, while Kendra lifted her chin like confidence could turn stolen access into permission. Gordon Price greeted me with a brief nod, and I knew from his face that Dana had sent him the cleanest version of my concerns. I stayed near the sidewall while Kendra moved through the room, accepting introductions and speaking with the ease of someone wearing borrowed trust. She began describing the community program to 2 donors, and the first sentence hit my chest because it had come from my proposal. Travis stood beside her, adding a line about our vision, as if my years of listening and writing had become a shared costume. One donor nodded warmly at Kendra, and that was when I understood why she had wanted the badge so badly. She had not wanted Travis in that room nearly as much as she wanted my credibility standing behind him. When Gordon invited me to clarify the program's next steps, the room quieted in that polished way wealthy rooms do before discomfort arrives. I walked to the center table and placed down the original proposal, Kendra's outreach email, the access log, and the hotel confirmation. This program was never authorized through anyone except my office. I kept my voice even because the papers were already louder than anger. Gordon read the first page, then the second, and the silence around us shifted from courtesy into recognition. Kendra's smile loosened at the edges, while Travis stared at the table like it might give him somewhere to hide. Gordon looked at me once, then at the documents, and asked whether this needed to move into an internal review after the event. It entered the event when someone used my name to enter it. I answered, and several faces turned toward Kendra's badge. Gordon closed the folder with both hands, then addressed Travis and Kendra quietly enough to sound professional but clearly enough to carry. Their access would pause immediately. Their donor contact would stop, and any vendor involvement would wait until counsel reviewed the records. The largest donor in the room folded his program booklet, slid it under his arm, and walked away without saying goodbye. After the preview, Gordon led us into a smaller conference room where the glass walls made every expression feel contained, not less exposed. Dana sat beside me with her folder closed, because the documents had already spoken clearly enough in the gallery. Travis stayed near the door with his shoulders squared, trying to look wronged while watching every paper on the table. Kendra kept one hand around her bag strap, as if professional escape might still be available if she stayed polished. The outside counsel Gordon had brought in read the access log first, then Kendra's email, then the hotel confirmation marking me absent. Travis tried to pull the room back into our marriage before the paperwork could keep breathing. "This is personal, Brooke, and you know it," he pushed out, his voice careful enough to sound rehearsed. Dana tapped the highlighted email and kept her tone flat, because flat truth was harder to argue with. Personal would be dinner. Travis, not donor outreach under her office. Kendra shifted in her chair when Gordon looked at the badge record instead of her face. "You understood this access was tied to Brooke's department." He pressed, and her silence gave the room more than denial. Then she reached for Travis with her eyes, like blame might still be transferable across the table. "He told me it was fine," she whispered, and the coffee shop sentence returned with sharper edges. I kept my voice level because anger would only make the truth easier to dismiss. "You told me he said I never used that access anymore. So you knew whose name opened the door." Gordon closed his eyes for 1 second, and that small pause felt heavier than shouting. The decision came without drama, which made it feel final in a way Travis seemed unprepared for. Their access would be locked. Donor contact would stop. Kendra's company would leave the vendor track, and every related message would go to counsel. Travis stared at me like I had taken something, but every page on the table carried his own fingerprints. "What else do you want from me?" he breathed, and I stood beside Dana with my papers gathered. "Nothing," I answered. "I'm only putting the right names back on what you borrowed." After the room locked around Travis and Kendra, I did not keep swinging, because clean endings do not need extra noise. Dana filed the divorce papers with the same careful precision she had brought to every document that protected my name. We separated property, devices, accounts, and professional liability without turning the process into a battlefield for people who liked watching women bleed publicly. Travis signed the first set of responses through his attorney, and the silence between us finally became more useful than conversation. His messages still came for a while, softer than his voice had been in that conference room, but not honest enough to matter. He wrote that Kendra had pushed too hard, that everything had moved faster than he expected, and that he never meant to damage my reputation. I read each line once, then forwarded it to Dana without answering, because I had learned that guilt often dresses itself as tenderness. All communication through counsel, Dana sent back. And those 4 words felt like a door closing without my hand shaking. Kendra's ending arrived more quietly, but it arrived with the weight of every badge scan and email she had pretended not to understand. Her company removed her from cultural clients. Donor replies went cold, and the silver access card became part of a file she could not smooth over. I heard she tried attending another event downtown, smiling at the entrance until the staff checked the list and told her she was not registered. By then, I had moved into a small apartment near the Pearl District, where rain tapped the windows without sounding lonely. On my first night there, I unpacked 2 glasses, 1 plate, and a stack of books I had not opened in years. The quiet felt strange at first, then honest, then almost kind, because nobody was using it to hide another life. I stood in the kitchen with warm tea between my hands and realized I was not waiting for footsteps anymore. The divorce was not loud, but it was final, and for the first time in months, final felt like mercy. Months later, the museum did not reward me for surviving anything, because survival was never the job I wanted recognized. Gordon asked me to rebuild the guest access policy, vendor approval language, and donor contact rules for every public program we hosted. I accepted without smiling too much, because real power did not need applause when the lock finally worked correctly. My nameplate stayed on my office door, not as decoration, but as proof that I had not been erased. Every time I passed it, I remembered the guest list that called me absent and the badge that proved otherwise. Portland rain softened the windows that afternoon, and I walked back to my apartment without feeling hunted by any bright restaurant glass. I wrote 1 letter to Travis that I never mailed, because some words are meant to leave the body, not restart the conversation. I told him the worst part was never that he chose someone else, but that he thought I would miss the evidence. Then I folded the page away, made tea, and let the quiet become mine without asking permission. Thank you for staying with Brooke's story until the end. And if any part of her strength felt familiar, share your thoughts below. May every woman who has been made to feel absent find the peace, courage, and love that finally says her name clearly.